On today's podcast, we have a very, very special guest, the legendary A&R man, the one and only Michael Alago. We discussed his long and illustrious career in music, beginning in the 70s and 80s in New York's East Village scene, his time in A&R at Elektra, where he signed Metallica. We talked about his A&R philosophies. We talked about some of the artists that he worked with, like Tracy Chapman's debut album. We talked about his whole aspect of what he looked for, his move to Geffen Records out here in California, and many, many other aspects of his life. You guys may know him from the documentary that's been made on his life, Who the Fuck Is That Guy, that airs on Netflix. You don't want to miss this. Insiders, are you ready? Welcome to MUBUTV's Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage artists and music business professionals who are dedicated to having a successful career in the new music industry. Here are your hosts, Ritch, Esra, and Eric Knight.
Welcome back, Insiders, to another episode of the MUBUTV Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage your music career. On today's episode, we sat down and spoke with the legendary A&R man, the one and only Michael Alago. We discussed his long and illustrious career in music beginning in the 70s and 80s in New York City's East Village scene, his time in A&R at Elektra, where he signed the legendary band Metallica, his move to LA, where he went to work for Geffen Records, where he discovered and signed White Zombie, as well as the great documentary they made on his life entitled Who the Fuck Is That Guy, and much, much more. You won't want to miss it. But first, a word from our sponsor. Hey, Insiders, are you looking to take your music career to the next level? Then you need to know about the Music Business Registry. The Music Business Registry is the leading music industry publisher of the most up-to-date contact information for major and independent record label A&R, music publishers, artist managers, music attorneys, music supervisors, and much, much more. The Music Business Registry is the trusted industry standard and source serving the music business community for over 28 years with the most accurate and up-to-date contact information available. Their titles include the A&R Registry, the Film and Television Music Monthly, the Music Publisher Registry, and the Music Attorney Registry. All of their publications are available in print, PDF, CSV, or online subscription. Visit them now at musicregistry.com and receive a 10% discount by using coupon code MUBUTV10 at checkout. That's musicregistry.com, coupon code MUBUTV10. When you're ready to put your music to work, musicregistry.com. Welcome back, Insiders. Today's featured interview is with Michael Alago, a legendary A&R executive known for his signings of Metallica and White Zombie. Michael was an executive in the A&R field in the 80s at Elektra and in the 90s at Geffen Records. And we had a fascinating conversation with him. Really, really interesting. I was enthralled with his conversation about growing up in the 70s and 80s and the vibrant music scene that existed in New York City, and especially in the East Village, and his stories about, how he, found Metallica, who were on Megaforce at the time, and worked with them and eventually signed them to Elektra, and the unique reasons how and why he discovered White Zombie and signed them. Also, we discussed the incredible documentary that's done on him called Who the Fuck Is That Guy? If you guys want to see it, it's on Netflix right now. Great documentary on his life growing up in New York and on his entire career in music. Yeah, this one was really fascinating for me, being a big hard rock fan and metal fan. I really loved his story and the whole idea of, one of the biggest things was, being a gay man in a male-driven testosterone world like hard rock and heavy metal, and how he was accepted into that world. And also just, like you said, how Metallica got on his radar and how he signed them, because that was very controversial at the time. At that point in time of Metallica's career, it was considered they were selling out because they were going into that whole major label thing, but it turned out to be the best thing because that's how they became even bigger and still are, huge, the biggest hard rock metal band in the world. And I thought some of the other points that I really liked about this, that he was just so in love and enthralled with music. He was out every night of the week watching bands, listening to bands, learning. And I think one of the great things that I thought that I loved about his interview was that he was listening and learning and applying what he had learned and what he would do and what he wouldn't do. And so I thought it was really, really coming from somebody that didn't have that kind of background. And, it was like he had those street smarts of like being in New York, of just being a kid on his own, because he was a kid going out on the streets at night, going to these clubs where they were real tough and stuff, CBGBs and, you know, Max's Kansas City.
And L'Amour's and
all that stuff.
Bands, yeah.
So this is an amazing, for me, document of a guy who's been there and done it all.
Absolutely. And a really fascinating personal journey for those of you who are interested in working in the music business. This is a very, very interesting journey about the ups and the downs, and Michael's very honest about those as well. So I hope you really enjoy this one.
Yeah, so sit back, insiders, and enjoy our featured interview with Michael Alago.
Today is life, the only life you're sure of. Make the most of today. Get interested in something. Shake yourself awake. Develop a hobby. Let the winds of enthusiasm sweep through you. Live today with gusto.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're very happy to have you. You know, I was telling Eric that I said, you know, Michael Alago is only the second person I know who is an A&R man who's had a documentary made on them. John Hammond, I think, was the first. And I think you're only the second person I'm aware of where they've made a documentary on your career in A&R.
Well, that sounds good to me.
Absolutely.
And it's great company to be in.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, the legendary John Hammond. Absolutely.
Oh, my. Yes, indeed.
So, Michael, I want to start at the beginning. You know, growing up as a kid, do you remember at what point, if ever in your life, that you knew that music was going to be your professional career path?
Yeah. Growing up, I always tell people I feel like I came out of the womb loving music. As a young boy growing up in Brooklyn, I just always loved music, and how that manifested itself was I would watch all the shows that were on the networks, whether it was Dick Clark's American Bandstand, Don Cornelius' Soul Train, Don Kirshner's Midnight Special, in concert on Friday nights. Yeah. And because there was such a wide variety of artists that performed on these shows, my listening at a very early age was big and wide, you know? So, you know, you're perhaps seeing Aretha Franklin singing on Dick Clark, and you hear David Bowie on Midnight Special. I mean, it was just an array of artists. So that helped me to hear lots of different kinds of music. I don't believe I ever had a plan B, meaning, yes, I always wanted to be in music. But what does that mean to a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old living in Brooklyn? So I watched the shows on TV. Am I going to be a Soul Train dancer? Am I going to rate a record with Dick Clark and those kids? I don't know. All I know is that I love music. So that's the way it was up until I was 19. I was going to the School of Visual Arts. I worked in a pharmacy on Astor Place. And one day I was walking down East 11th Street. I speak about it in the documentary that's on Netflix right now about me. And I see a beautiful building on East 11th, and it said something like Video Club opening, resumes wanted. And I thought, wow, this sounds interesting. Now, remember, it's 1980. MTV has just started. And so I walk into the building. And if you know anything about the Ritz, still or now called Webster Hall, it is a gorgeous Art Deco building. So when I walked up the stairs into the main hall, I was overtaken by how beautiful it was. There was a gentleman in the balcony, and he was like, "Kid, we're not open. What can I do for you?" And I looked around, and I looked up, and I said, "Well, I would like a job." And he said, "Do you have a resume?" And I said, "No, I don't have a resume. I go to the School of Visual Arts, and I work in a pharmacy." Well, he just kind of thought that was not laughable, but it put a smile on his face. So he called me up to his office. His name was Jerry Brandt, is Jerry Brandt. He's still alive, thank God. And he started talking to me about music and what did I think I wanted to do. I did not know. But in our conversation, we covered everything from the Great American Songbook to what was on the radio today. He liked what I had to say about music. He felt like because I was out every night, I had my ear to the ground. And he said to me, "Kid, I'm going to give you a job. You're going to answer my phone, you're going to open my mail, and you're going to get my lunch." Well, I thought to myself, oh my God, I'm in the music business.
Right.
I mean, that was a small precursor
Right.
of what was to happen
Right.
in my life. But, you know, Jerry Brandt, if you don't know this, he started out in the mailroom with David Geffen
Right.
at the William Morris Agency. Back in the day, Jerry worked with Sam Cooke. He worked with Muhammad Ali. He discovered the voices of East Harlem and Carly Simon. He was extraordinary, Jerry, a real entrepreneur. And in the 60s, he had the Electric Circus on St. Mark's Place. So I didn't know all of this about him when I got there. Eventually, I looked him up. It scared the bejesus out of me. And I just thought, I can't believe I'm working for this man. So, I mean, that's kind of how it all started.
Wow.
Yeah, it's what I say all the time.
It's interesting because you've covered a lot of stuff that, you know, we're going to ask you about in terms of
I knew I was doing that.
That's
No,
okay.
it's okay.
No, because I want to get into the details because there's so much more to cover in what you've talked about, and we'll fill in
Sure.
all of those spaces as well.
So, Michael, this is Eric, and thank you so much for doing this for us. I mean, I'm really
absolutely.
privileged and honored to have you on the show. Really big fan of your career.
Oh, good.
Yeah, when did you develop your passion for music, and who were some of the artists that you loved growing up, you know? And growing
Yeah.
up, did you see yourself as an outsider?
Good question. I grew up in Brooklyn. I was a bit of a loner. I liked being alone. I loved music, like I said, from a very early age. So whether I was listening to 77 WABC, Dan Ingram on the radio, or I was watching all these music programs on TV, I got to hear an extraordinary array of artists. I also, at an early age, bought 45 singles. I had a little gray Panasonic record player, and I would sit on my stoop and play 45s. Those 45s were everything from Aretha Franklin's Respect, Ooh Ooh Child by the 5 Stair Steps, Archie Bell and the Drells, Tighten Up, Grand Funk Railroad, Closer to Home, and on the 45, it was Part 1 and Part 2. So I just, at a very early age, developed a love for a variety of types of music.
What's interesting is that, you know, you had, as a kid, I mean, the kinds of things you're talking about, you had such a variety of styles that you loved. And we'll get into this later in our conversation, but you expanded even well beyond what you're talking about, your early influences, and more importantly, what you were exposed to and loved, whether it was Aretha or Archie, you know, the pop records or WABC, that you expanded well into a lot of other areas due to your passion for music, which, you know, to me, as a former A&R executive myself at Arista, it shows why you were able to have such the successful career that you did, because you really went beyond just what your own personal tastes were as a kid in terms of your influences. And that's interesting.
Sure.
And we'll get into that more, because the thing I want to talk to you about is that, you know, you were, and we learned this from the great documentary, Who the Fuck Is That Guy? That's the documentary that's out on your life, and it's on Netflix. And one of the things...
Yes, it's called Who the F Is That Guy? The Fabulous Journey of Michael Alago.
Oh, that's
and
right.
It's been renewed again for a third year, which is usually unheard of.
Yeah.
But so many people all over the world have been watching it, and I just think that that's why they renewed it up till September 2020.
And for anybody who hasn't watched it, you've
incredible.
got to watch it, because it's such a
It's
great,
wonderful.
great story.
And it's a
Thank
wonderful.
you so much.
Yeah, it really is. It's a great documentary. I've seen it twice already and really loved it. And the thing is that, you know, you were speaking about a time, which is what I want to ask you about. You were speaking
Sure.
about a time that was very, very creatively vibrant, not only in music, as the documentary on you focuses on, but on a lot of other aspects. And that's what I want to ask you about, is that, you know, there was such a great and vibrant scene in the 70s and 80s in New York City, especially in the East Village. And I was wondering if you could talk about what that scene was like and what your memories of it were.
Oh, boy, here we go. This could be a long one. Yeah, sure. I've always been a New Yorker. I grew up in Brooklyn. When I was 20, I moved into the city. I lived on East 10th Street between B and C. Now, that was a funky area back then. It was a scary area. You know, bodegas were selling not only soda pop, but they were selling heroin.
Yeah.
That area was real scary. But the beauty of it was that there was a vibrant art scene coming up, and it reflected in the artists like Richard Hambleton, who went around the city painting these black shadow men everywhere. Fabulous, big shadow men that if you turned a corner, it would startle you. You know, Jean-Michel Basquiat was coming up. But I knew Jean-Michel from my last 2 years of high school that we went to City as school together, but we could talk about that later. And, you know, of course, there was Keith Haring, and you would see him on the subways morning, noon, and night painting his childlike doodles that he made. And, you know, half the times he would get arrested, and once he got out of, you know, jail overnight, he'd go right back to doodling on the subways again. Anyway, so it was a very vibrant, interesting scene. All these people were so original, and I was a person who loved music and art and theater. I started going to the theater when I was, I think, 15 years old, and I knew about the theater because I would pick up the Village Voice. I'm not sure if it came out every Wednesday back then, but it was like a once a week. So that had everything in it from art, theater, the porn theaters, and, of course, all the nightclubs. And I gravitated to all of that. So that also helped inform me what was going on and where. Did I answer your question?
No, absolutely. So I mean, you know, what I'm getting from you is that you really were engulfed or ensconced in the culture. You not only were interested in art, but you were interested in the scene, in the people. You had some obvious, you know, relationships with people. You knew Basquiat, you knew that whole scene, and you also were you mentioned this last part, which is that you were very, very much informed about what was going on in the clubs. Talk about what was going on in the clubs. I mean, you've spoken about the art scene and the vibe, but the clubs were a very, very important part because they're essential. I think they're an essential thread to your particular journey in your life professionally. They I would think, informed a lot of what you eventually, you know, focused your life on, which was music. And you were seeing a lot of these bands in clubs. What was that scene like? Yeah, talk about that scene because it was a vibrant one.
Well, very early on, my mom made a deal with me that if I did well in school, I could go out. Well, I think I was escaping from Brooklyn almost every night and going somewhere. That somewhere was Max's Kansas City, CBGB, sometimes Great Gildersleeves, but not much, Madison Square Garden, so many different places. Now, what I loved about the scene back then was Hilly Crystal, owner of CBGB, was starting to book all of these punk bands that were getting signed, a lot of them by Seymour Stein at Sire Records.
Right.
Whether it was Richard Hell and the Voidoids, the Ramones, who else did
Talking Heads.
The Talking Heads, the Dead Boys. Well, I fell in love with the Dead Boys. They were like the bastard sons of the Stooges. I loved their crazy antics on stage, and I went to see them every single time they came here from Cleveland, Ohio. At one point, my friend Jody and I decided we were going to start a fan club. So we made a zine with all these cut-out punk letters. Now, what did we know at 15 years old how to run a business? It wasn't really a business. We made a zine or two. That was it. But we continued to go see the Dead Boys. So like I said, I'm lucky that my mind was always open to different styles of music. And, you know, I took in what I loved, and as they say, you leave the rest behind. But, like, I was out every night. I really was. I was out every night in the 70s and 80s. What started it all was June 3rd, 1973. It was the last night of Alice Cooper's Billion Dollar Babies tour. And my cousin had a boyfriend, Manny the Greek from Astoria, and he had 2 tickets. She didn't want to go. She said, take my young cousin. Well, was I in for a surprise? Alice Cooper, the theatricality, something a 13-year-old had never seen before. I did see him on a Friday night in concert at 11:30 at night, and I thought, wow. But little did I know that soon after I'd be seeing him in concert. Well, that changed my life, Alice Cooper. To this day, I could still go to see Alice Cooper, and 44 years later, he's doing the same show. It's still fantastic, and I love every waking moment of it. So back then, my tastes ranged from the Dead Boys to Roxy Music, David Bowie, Lou Reed, Todd Rundgren, Todd is God, Todd Rundgren. And like I said, I don't know, I was just hearing so many things and loving so many things and purchasing so much vinyl and 45 singles.
I think it was a product of the times that you had such a wide breadth, because that era had so many different types of great music, and there was so much creativity. And I mean, you were literally a part of the movement that was shifting culture musically on a global scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is interesting to listen to you give it in this chronology, Michael, because all of this background, all of this provides a great subtext for the first job in the music business, which was working at the Ritz with Jerry.
Yes, and I was his assistant.
Right.
And as the year went on, the first year went on, I'm sorry to interrupt you, I started booking the acts there. So I was like the assistant booking director. I was a sponge. I listened to every single thing Jerry had to say to those booking agents on the phone. Whether he was talking to the fabulous, late, great Ian Copeland from FBI, whether he was talking with Rob Light at ICM, whoever he was talking to book that room, which, I don't know, held 1,500, 1,800 people, I listened so that I could learn how to speak to those agents about dollars and cents and break-even points and what you pay Prince and what you pay Prince. You're not going to pay 3 local bands on a Sunday night.
Right.
So I learned from listening to Jerry. Really, he was and is so fantastic. And I was there for about 3 years, and then I felt like there was more out there.
There was.
But yet again, I did not know what that more was yet.
Hey, Insiders, we hope that you've been enjoying our featured interview. Stay tuned because we've got so much more value coming your way. But before we dive back in, a word from our sponsor. Hey, Ritch, you're the founder, CEO, legend of Music Business Registry. Tell us what the Music Business Registry is all about.
Well, what it's about, Eric, is it's a company that is designed to provide the most accurate and up-to-date contact information for the music business. So if someone is looking to reach the A&R community, if someone is looking to reach music publishers, if someone needs to reach artist managers, if someone needs to reach music attorneys, if someone's looking to place their music into film and television and needs to reach all the music supervisors, that's the contact information that we provide. We've been doing it for 28 years. We're sort of the industry standard, if you will, for the music business and have been serving them since 1992. So that's what we do.
Amazing. So if I wanted to find out, let's say A&R people from Warner Brothers, let's say, I can just go in there and find that in the A&R registry?
Absolutely. You'll find all of the Warner Brothers in there. You'll find the Warner Brothers in LA, Warner Brothers in New York, Warner Brothers in Nashville, Warner Brothers in London, Warner Brothers, probably in Australia as well. So those are the main territories that we cover.
Amazing. And we're offering all of our insiders right now that are listening, if you visit musicregistry.com and use coupon code MUBUTV10 at checkout, you'll get a 10% discount off your first order. That's musicregistry.com, coupon code MUBUTV10. Anything else you want to say, Ritch?
Well, when you're ready to put your music to work, musicregistry.com. Okay. Now, let's stay with the Ritz for a minute, because it was a very seminal time in music, as we've just established, and there was a lot of not only great music, but there was a whole, as Eric said, there was stuff that was moving the culture, and it was on a global level. You were coming across music from England, coming across music from Australia, coming across music from Germany. I guess my question is, number one, how did you go from being an assistant to being an assistant booker, which is a whole different skill set? And number two, can you talk about some of the acts that you were involved with booking during your time at the Ritz?
I became an assistant booker because, like I said, I was a sponge and listened to everything Jerry had to say. And at some point, he had more blind faith in me and allowed me to do that job. And he would listen in on what I was talking to the agents about. And like I said, I learned quickly. And every week I'd get the Village Voice, I'd get Melody Maker, New Musical Express, Sounds from the UK. I'd get all publications so I'd be aware of what was going on locally, nationally, globally. There's a historic story that I have told time and time again, but it yielded greatness in the end. It was May 1981, Bow Wow Wow, who was managed by Malcolm McLaren, were coming over to do the Ritz. And at one point, at the beginning of that week, Malcolm McLaren called me and said, "We're not coming." I said, "What do you mean we're not coming?" "Well, Annabella, she's underage, and her mom won't let her travel overseas." I said, "Oh, really? Well, you know what? I'll buy her mother a ticket. Y'all are just getting here. We have a Friday and Saturday night that are completely sold out, and I've already sent you a 50% deposit." So he said, "Well, we're not coming." I said, "Okay, I would like you to wire transfer that money back, and I will be looking for it." And end of part one of that conversation. I have to start thinking quickly. What do people want to see on that caliber of a Bow Wow Wow, who are up and coming? Their first album, I believe, was out on RCA. It's sold out. Well, I don't know how this happened. I don't remember exactly how it happened, but Public Image Limited, PIL, were in Liz Rosenberg's office at Warner Brothers. They were here on a press junket to promote Flowers of Romance. And I thought, oh my God, this is perfect. Ask PIL to play. People will lose their mind. Well, they lost their mind eventually at the show, but in a very different way than I thought. Anyway, I called Liz Rosenberg's office. I didn't know John Lydon yet, and I gave him a spiel, as only I can give a New York spiel. And in the end, I said, "I'd love for y'all to come down to my office. I'll have a car. You'll meet Jerry Brandt, Danny Fields, who was then our publicist for a bit of time, and myself." And they kept saying, "You know what? We don't have any instruments here. We are just on a press junket." And I said, "We have to make something work." So they came to the office. A couple of hours went by. They loved the idea of this 20, 30-foot-inch white screen that we had on the stage. They thought they were going to be doing some kind of performance art.
Oh, yeah.
People did not want performance art. This was Johnny Rotten coming back as John Lydon, and they wanted rock and roll. So that week, I think I spoke to a couple of DJs at WLIR-FM. I asked them to, we'd give them 25 pairs of tickets, just talk about the show all week. Well, that Friday night came. The show, of course, was sold out. The second night was sold out. The band start playing. They're behind the screen. I mean, artistically, but nobody cared about that. Artistically, it was a white screen with these beautiful lights. So all you saw were these black figures dancing around. And then when people were getting a little restless, about 15, 18 minutes into Flowers of Romance, of course, John peeked his head out from behind the screen and let everybody know they were never coming out to perform for them. It was basically like a take it or leave it. Didn't go over too well.
Aye.
So about 20 minutes in, the crowd really was restless. And John was taunting them as only he can taunt. So what wound up happening is chairs started flying off the balcony, beer bottles started flying, and it kind of got dangerous. So at one point, we just had to shut down the show. And so we did. And I went backstage. I was talking to John. He thought it was a bit of a laugh. There was a kid sitting outside, I think his name was Scott, of the dressing room. His head got cut open from bottles, so I wrapped his head, and he said, "Can I meet John?" I was like, "Sure." So he came into the dressing room. He was happy as a clam. He could have cared less that his whole head was bleeding, and security had to, keep the crowd in order. And I don't know, an hour later or so, the building was being emptied, and Jerry was like, "Well, what are we going to do tomorrow?" And of course I said, "Bring them back." He was not amused with me. I think what happened the next night was some local bands played, and that was it. But it's a show that people ask me about, what is 1981, 38 years later. But the beauty of that show, on a personal level, is I became friends with John Lydon, and we've been friends 38 years now. Never had a bad word with each other. I signed him to Elektra in 1985. I had to drop him in 86. It was not cost effective to keep him because the deal we made was so expensive and the records weren't selling like we thought they were. But what an extraordinary, brilliant guy he is. And I love him very, very much. And so that in a nutshell, that was one of the infamous shows from the Ritz that I booked. Well, there was a day I picked up the phone and I said, "Hello, Jerry Brandt's office. May I help you?" And the woman on the other end said, "Hi, this is Yoko Ono, and I would like to speak to Mr. Brandt." "Oh, of course, please hold the line." I said, "Jerry, Yoko Ono's on the phone." Now, my timing might be a little off. I know John was killed the end of the year in 1980.
Right.
Being the artist that she is, I'm sure she was grieving big time, but she was also making a video of a song called "Walking on Thin Ice" that they were recording the night that he was killed, actually. And so I don't know if it was a month later or 6 weeks or 2 months later, she knew about this huge screen at the Ritz, and it was almost like a gift to New York, this video that she made. Now, the video, if people have not seen it, it's widely available on YouTube. Just Google it. And it's scenes from them at home, at the Dakota. It's scenes of them in bed. It's scenes of Sean when he was very small. And by the middle end of that video, it is a very defiant Yoko Ono walking down the street, Times Square, getting in and out of a car, turning around, and freeze frames on this very powerful image. Well, it was extraordinary. People were crying. People freaked out when they saw the video. I mean, everybody worldwide was so tender from that horrible moment, not even just in rock and roll history, in the world. Someone so beautiful, and the humanity that he had was just crushed.
Now, from the Ritz, you, after 3 years, you said you then went on to Elektra Records as an A&R executive.
Correct.
And here's my question to you. Was it difficult coming from a more free-form environment of the Ritz into a more high-profile corporate environment like Elektra?
I was going out with someone named Mitchell Krasnow. His dad's name was Bob Krasnow. Bob was running, one of the A&R people, one of the chief executives at Warner Brothers. Bob was leaving Warner Brothers to go to become the chairman of Elektra. At that point in time, I hate saying this, but Elektra was kind of in the crapper, for lack of a better word, sorry. And Bob was going to pull the label back together again. A lot of people were saying, you know what, David Geffen's just going to come in and take over. That didn't happen.
No.
Mitchell said, "Mike, my dad's going to take over Elektra. I think my dad should meet you." Great. So I meet Bob Krasnow. We were in the Rolex building then at 665 Fifth Avenue. And I was scared. I had no idea what I was going to talk to this corporate guy about. So I meet Bob. He was very gracious. And I had that same conversation with him that I had with Jerry Brandt. We started talking about music and the wide array of music, from back in the day to R&B to top 40. I threw in my little bits of heavy metal here and there. And the beauty also of that interview was that on Bob's walls, because Bob knew, I didn't know this yet, but Bob knew how to merge art and commerce successfully and beautifully. So on the wall in his office, he had a Robert Longo painting. Walking down the halls of Elektra, there was, in a big, big frame, a big yellow Devo suit that they used to wear. There was some kind of macrame by Joni Mitchell. I mean, there was a wide array of things in that office at Elektra. So we talked about art as well. Interview's over. A week or two goes by. And he said, I'm going to give you a job. I think I cried when I hung up the phone. I had no idea what that entailed. I had no idea what the words A&R meant. I just knew he was going to give me a job. So, of course, I asked around what the heck A&R meant, artist and repertoire. And I thought, well, I have no idea what's going on here. So, like Jerry, Bob Krasnow was very, very gracious with me and very patient with me. Again, I would be in his office when I heard him talking to lawyers, not so much artists, but lawyers, managers, publishers, and I would hear him speaking. And I don't know what kind of time frame went by, but after a while, he said, speak to Michael Alago. I was the first person he hired when he got there. Never mind the first A&R person that he hired there, but one of the first people he brought in under this new regime. Well, I just started doing the job. I had an executive assistant, and I remember telling Tony that we have to get every music magazine across the United States. Let's look at San Francisco, Los Angeles, Memphis, Nashville, Boston, Austin, Dallas. Let's go up north to Toronto and Montreal. Get all those publications, newspapers, specific heavy metal publications, and let's just start looking through them and let's see what sounds interesting. So besides the lawyers and managers and artists who were coming to see me, we went through, it was very cut and paste. There wasn't really like internet in 83, the way we know it today. So I don't know, that's how I did my job, by meeting people. I signed a little group from Red Bank, New Jersey called Shrapnel, who I adored. Richie Cordell produced the EP with Glenn Kolotkin. It was 5 songs, didn't do much of anything. Good band. One of the things I learned, you can't just sign your friends. So I was digging deep, and the second band that I signed was Metallica, and that kind of changed everything.
So let me ask you, so what was the music scene like in New York City when you started at Elektra? And the follow-up would be, back then as an A&R executive, what did a typical day look like for you?
Oh, sure. What was the music scene like? Well, I knew that most of my focus was going to be on hard rock and heavy metal, my favorites. So that's a lot of the stuff that when Tony and I were looking through publications, we just cut things out. Or if somebody had a good look, we cut the picture out to call those people because they have an independent release out and see if they want to speak to anybody at a major. So my day was reading publications, making appointments with artists, lawyers, managers, listening to tons of cassettes.
Wow.
Tons of cassettes.
Yeah. Yes.
And I listened to them, I think, until my ears bled,
Wow,
but that was the job. I had to listen to new music that was unsigned, or if they were on an independent label, they were looking for a major to be with. And, over those years, I did A&R for 25 years. Over those years, I heard a lot of good stuff. But like I say, good is not great. If you start signing everything good, you're over your head. You just can't do it. So I was always very specific about the artist that I signed.
When you got signed on to Elektra, did Bob and them tell you that was going to be your focus, was hard rock and heavy metal, or you just kind of took that upon yourself, or how did that?
I took that upon myself.
Okay.
Bob gave his A&R people room to sink or swim. I was going to swim in my mind. So he really let you go. I mean, he hired you for a reason. You were either going to be great at your job or you were not. And I had incredible instincts for people who I felt had star quality, who were charismatic, who had something to say. And those are the people I wanted to work with.
You know, Michael, as an A&R executive, when you were at Elektra, you know, you also work with, I mean, I know this from working in A&R as well, that you also work with acts that you didn't sign. You work with acts that are on the label. Can you talk to us about some of the artists that you worked in an A&R capacity with at Elektra? Because I know that there's some real seminal ones in there.
Right. Well, one day Bob called me into his office once again and said, I just signed this girl from Boston. She's playing next week up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I know Charles Koppelman is going to go along with his son Brian, who helped bring this artist to Elektra, and her name is Tracy Chapman. And I mean, talk about a quiet, beautiful presence with those extraordinary songs.
Oh my God!
She had in her for a long period of time, and got to work that out beautifully on that first extraordinary record she made with David Kirschenbaum.
Yes.
Now, so Bob said, you're her A&R person, and I was like, great, wonderful. I mean, I loved hearing, you know, the unmixed versions of Fast Car and talking about a revolution, all that stuff. And it was very exciting. She was very shy. I was not. So we got along. I would say we got along. And I was there mostly for mixing and mastering of that record.
Yeah.
And, you know, I remember there's a little story that on a Wednesday at our marketing meetings, they were talking about the single being Baby Can I Hold You? And I thought to myself, oh, my God, I've been living with this record for a year, and that's not the single.
Right.
So I quietly dipped outside of the marketing meeting. I ran down the hall to Bob's office. I said, listen, we got to play it cool. Everybody's saying that Baby Can I Hold You is the single. He said, I'll be right there. Go back to the marketing meeting. So I said, back to the marketing meeting. 5 minutes later, I think Bob walks in, and he said, I hear we're on Tracy Chapman. Is that right? Yes. Okay. So what do all of you think the single is? And they said, Baby Can I Hold You? He said, it's not the single. The single is Fast Car. And he walked out of the marketing meeting. And now once Bob said something like that, Kraz, you knew that was the single. There was no talking about it. There's no arguing. And, you know, Bob knew.
Yeah.
And that's incredible that you had that kind of relationship with him, that you could go in there and tell him something that he would act upon and come back and...
Yes, I did. I was so... I felt so lucky that I had Bob's ear. You know, there were days the door to my office would be closed, and I'd be listening to cassettes real loud. The door would knock, and, you know, he didn't ask to come in. He just opened the door, and I'd be like, oh, no, what does Bob want? And he would look down at my feet, and he said, oh, I like those shoes. Let's go over to Madison Avenue for a shoe shine. And I mean, that, you know, you never knew what Bob was coming to your office for.
Yeah. Right.
Was it a shoe shine? Was it to ask how Tracy's moving along? Or would he be knocking on your door, and the two heads that popped into your office was Bob's and Andy Warhol with the newest copy of Interview magazine that he signed for every single employee on that floor.
Oh, my
I mean,
God.
so Bob did all these things all the time. Bob was extraordinary. I loved Bob so much. But that's not where we were. Yes. So I worked with Tracy on that record, and I also worked on the art direction for the packaging of that record, which, you know, I originally had Robert Mapplethorpe shoot the cover. He was dying of AIDS, and the day I brought him Tracy to his studio, I mean, he couldn't even stand up. He was sitting in a beautiful chair with a bathrobe on, and I said, do you want us to come back another day? He said, no, I'm shooting this today. So I left them both for the whole day there. I get back the pictures about a week later, and they're not good. And this is like, a $30,000-$40,000
Oh, my God.
shoot.
Yeah.
So, oh, please. So, in the end, we wound up not using his pictures. People talked about giving him a kill fee, and I had to go to Bob's office again. I said, Robert is dying. Robert is world-renowned. There will be bad press on Elektra and Time Warner if we do this. He said, just give him the money. I said, I can't tell the president of the company to give him money. You have to call him right now. So he called Hale Milgram, and, we have to pay Robert Mapplethorpe. So at one point, I see a picture in Time magazine of a little boy who's really, really angry, and it was taken by Matt Mahurin. So I call, A&R people are not supposed to be delving into radio and putting your nose in everybody else's department's business, but I did that, and I didn't care. So anyway, to make a long story longer, Robin Sloan, who was like the VP of video and creative services, we talked about this picture I saw. So she was also friends with Matt Mahurin, and Matt Mahurin gave us back that beautiful, quiet photograph of Tracy with her head turned to the left, and that spoke volumes of what that record sounded like.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I remember hearing about Tracy Chapman when the single came out. Hilburn in the LA Times made her the cover story of Calendar in the LA Times that Sunday. And I remember reading that piece and just, the power, and Bob wasn't one to be effusive about things that, were bullshit. I mean, he really focused on this woman. And I remember running out, and because I was at Arist at the time, and I remember it was a Sunday, and I made myself like a little note to call my friend at Elektra to get like the little promo, because it wasn't commercially available at that time. And I sent a messenger over to Elektra Records to get and was just, I mean, when I heard the single, I was like, oh, back in those days, you couldn't just power up a computer and listen. But just, I was knocked out. And here's an interesting fact, which you may or may not know about that song.
Sure.
It is the only top 10 hit in the history of pop music ever to have, I believe it's 4 or 5 verses before the chorus. Ever. There is no other song in pop music history that has 4 or 5 verses before the hook of the song.
I did not know that.
It is true.
That's very interesting.
Yes.
And what a beautiful song.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. The power of that story, yes.
When you heard that voice, it almost had like an androgynous feel to it. And it just pricked up your ears. And you thought, wow, this is something else.
But it was arresting. It was absolutely, that
totally
voice was arresting.
And I think at that point in time, too, people were ready for singer-songwriters again.
Oh, yeah, they were.
People wanted to be spoken to. And there you go.
My follow-up to the meeting that you guys were having at the marketing meeting for the single, what happened in retrospect when after you went to Bob, he ran in, said that Fast Car is the single, and then the song just took off. Clearly this thing was multiple Grammy win. Did he ever come back to you and say that was a great call? Or
God, no.
Okay.
No.
No.
It was just, that's what happened.
Yeah.
And we were all grateful and happy. And,
they must have looked at him like a genius, thinking, oh, my God, he was right with Fast Car, because it was an out-of-the-box, just huge single. So I was just curious, No,
it didn't develop like that. There were people in that marketing meeting that thought Fast Car should be it, but a lot of people thought it was Baby Can I Hold You. So when that was going on, I just had to go to Bob and say, Bob, you got to just fix this right this minute. And he did. And, everybody was happy in the end. And, rubbed people's noses in what perhaps they didn't get the first time around. And some of those people, they were marketing, they were radio, they were publicity people. They weren't... maybe some of them didn't have that ear that was so, not finessed, but the ear that one needed to be an A&R executive.
Yeah. Yes.
Everybody just did their job, and I was doing my job, and my job was to make sure that the best things happened for any one of my records that were out there.
Tell me, Michael, about the criteria that you developed out of that consciousness that you spoke of, where you realized, you know what, I can't just sign the things that I like or that my friends or that are good. I have to go for great. Talk about what that criteria was for you as an executive in terms of your progress as an A&R executive.
Sure. A&R and greatness to me equaled someone who was wildly charismatic on the stage and hopefully off the stage as well. And they had, he, she, they as a band had something to say. And that something to say was hopefully words that had global appeal. And, you know, it's a funny thing that even if people, other A&R people in the community said, oh, I'm signing so-and-so. Now, I would hear so-and-so's demo, and I would think, oh, wow, this is really cool, but I don't like this kind of music. I'm not signing it. And how can I live with myself? Now, there were times that I was wrong about artists, but I didn't care. If I couldn't live with what that artist was singing about, I didn't care. I was just very, very specific. So like I said, I think somebody has to have something to say on hopefully an international, global criteria for signing artists were that they had to be wildly charismatic. They had to know how to connect with an audience. They had to know lyrically that what they were singing about, the masses would hopefully connect with. And when I wound up seeing someone live, and you know what, specifically Metallica, I saw Metallica and I thought, these young people are so cool. They are relentless on the stage with their playing, and their singer, James Hetfield, is a ringleader on stage. He knows how to bring that audience into listening to what he has to say, and it drove the young people wild.
Yeah. And it's a great segue because I want to stay with that with you with Metallica.
Sure.
You know, how did Metallica first get on your radar, and what was your ultimate vision for them when you signed them? Now, you know, this is, you know, and I'm thinking back now, they were on Megaforce at the time. I believe they put out Ride the Lightning, Kill 'Em All, and then there was this segue into that. How did they come on your radar, and how did that whole transition happen?
There was a confluence of things happening literally all at once. My colleague Johnny Z called me up on the phone. He had this label called Megaforce. He had made records with first records with Metallica, Anthrax, Raven, Testament, a whole slew of metal people. But they were truly an independent, and they wanted to be hooked up with a major for incredible distribution. So I met with John a few times, but I had also, because I was out every night and listening to music every night, my friend Phil Cavano from Monster Magnet and I went to L'Amour's in Brooklyn. Must have been late 82, even before I was at Elektra, and we saw Metallica there, and we just lost our minds. So I knew, and I put that in the back of my head. So I start in like March of 83 at Elektra. I meet with John sometime in 83, 84. I listen to these records. They're all fabulous records, but Kill 'Em All was the thing that blew me away. I had never heard anything this powerful or relentless. Of course, and I say this all the time, anyone who loved heavy metal, we were listening to the staples of whether it's a Deep Purple, an Ozzy Osbourne, a Black Sabbath, a Judas Priest, and we were loving it. But then what happens? These 20-year-olds put out a record, and it is relentless. It's a little bit punk. It's a little bit British metal. It's a little bit American traditional heavy metal mixed with speed. And that just took you to a place that you never got taken to before. And I loved it. So I saw them at the Stone in San Francisco in, 83. I said hello to them. I gave Lars, the drummer, my card. I knew that they were under contract. And I said, you know what? I love you guys. If you come to New York, please give me a call. I'd love to bring the people from Elektra. So it was the beginning, a couple of months into 84. I hear from Lars, and he said, well, man, I don't know if you're still interested in us because we never heard from you again. And I said, well, guys, I just didn't want to screw around with anything because you are a megaforce. But I loved the performance that I saw. And what's up? They said, well, we're going to be at Roseland with Anthrax and Raven as part of a triple act bill, August of 1984. I said, I will be there. They wound up, I believe, being the middle act. I had Mike Bone, head of radio promotion there at Roseland, and Bob Krasnow. And I don't know if they loved the band at all, but they saw that energy. They felt that energy, that relentlessness, that when Metallica came on stage, they ripped everybody's head off. They set that place, like that saying, they ripped the roof off the place, and they did. And so when the show was over, I went backstage, and I said, guys, this was like awesome. Come to my office tomorrow. They came to my office the next day. I ordered Chinese food and beer. I had Bob meet them. And, you know, like I said, did Bob understand what that music was about? No. But if Michael loves it, then I love it. And we're going to sign you. So, you know, I had to have this talk. Oh, I had to backtrack just for 60 seconds. I was doing a demo with one of Johnny Z's bands, Raven, power trio from the UK.
Yes, I love them.
I gave him, me too. I gave him $5,000. I said, give me back 5 of your most wonderful songs. He gave me back the DAC or something like that. And I thought, well, you know, John, I have to tell you, Raven are fabulous, but I don't want to sign them. I want to sign Metallica. Well, he kind of lost his mind, and I said, you know what, we really have to work this out because we can take them to places that you can't take them. Well, he was furious. I don't remember how the conversation ended, but not really so good. And I said, Bob, I went to Bob again, as always. I said, we have to make this work. I don't remember who his counsel was back then, but ours was a man named Gary Casson, who was fabulous. I loved Gary Casson. I think I was the only A&R person on that whole floor that he would let me go into his office whenever I wanted to and say whatever I wanted to and spend as much time as I wanted to with him. He was awesome. Anyway, so, you know, in the end, what it is, money talks. We had the money to pay for them to get off Megaforce and be on Elektra. They were in the middle of doing Ride the Lightning. For a brief moment, it came out on Megaforce, and then everything got transferred over to Elektra. And, you know, like, I don't know what to say. The rest is really history. I mean, everybody at that point in time, after that signing, that changed the total landscape of rock and roll, heavy metal, music in general. Everybody wanted their own Metallica. I mean, but that is a thing. I don't know if it happens once in a lifetime or that it's that cyclical, that it happens every 20 years. But, you know, there really is only one Metallica. They are extraordinary. And here we are, that we are still speaking to them, speaking about them with this, well, if I speak about them with this reverence and this excitement, because you know what? 35 years later, they are still playing stadiums.
They're the biggest band. They're the biggest hard rock metal act of all time. I mean, how does that feel for you? Is that vindication, like everything? You know, how does that feel know that?
I really did feel that these guys are going to be huge because I saw the first two times that I saw them, I saw what they did to the crowd, and the crowd were relentless. They loved them. And I thought, man, I love these guys. And again, the rest is history. I mean, every record they made was different. If you ask the fans, a lot of people wish they could have just made Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, and Master of Puppets all over again. You know, some people don't like Load. They don't like Saint Anger.
They definitely don't like the Lulu album.
Oh, honey. But wait a minute. Hold on to that, because I have one thing to say about that. And, you know, everyone loved And Justice for All, but they wanted to know where the bass was.
Right.
You know, we had so many problems with that record.
Yeah.
But it's an extraordinary record. And if they went on to make the same record all the time, they would not be where they are now. And just one brief moment, God bless, rest in peace, Lou Reed. That is a Lou Reed record. That Metallica happens to be backing him up. In my mind, it's a Lou Reed record, and wow, Metallica is a backup band. That's all we really have to say about that record. But there were parts of that record, I have to tell you, that I really loved.
Right. Yeah, because it's mixing the two passions that you had, so that just must have come full circle for you to see that.
New York Underground mixed with my favorite heavy metal band.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, who would have ever thought?
Really quickly.
Oh, yeah, not me.
Yeah, really quickly too, Michael,
Yes,
just
please.
on a sidetrack to this, were they at Q Prime at the time already working with Peter and Cliff?
No, they were not.
They were not. That came after.
Everything also, like I said, started happening at the same time.
Gotcha.
That I don't know if it was that week, that night, 2 weeks later, Q Prime started managing them.
Yeah, because it's such a critical thing to assemble the team around a band.
Oh, yeah.
And so I just was curious because, I mean, Q Prime. Yeah.
Q Prime as well. They're not A&R people, but they have those qualities about them. They know. So, they had also heard Metallica. I'm not sure if they were at the Roseland gig or not so long ago. But, like I said, a week or so later, they were managing them, and they're still managing them 35 years later.
Michael, I want to sort of expand the conversation as an A&R executive to talk about some of the other aspects of your job, and specifically because you were in the hard rock independent music scene and you were encountering a lot of acts. My question is, was there ever any resistance to you as an A&R executives from bands that you were interested in due to a perception of so-called selling out? Was that ever something that you encountered? And I ask because it's something that I hear a lot about today, and that I'll call it's a different world today than it was then, but it's something that I hear from A&R people a lot, that, that is something they have to encounter. The idea of not necessarily selling out, but I'm not interested in being with a major label. I've seen too many years of, whatever, fill in the blank, that I'm not interested in. Did you ever encounter that at the time, or was everybody who you were interested in willing to talk to you? What was the reality?
I think at some point all artists might be willing, or for myself specifically, I think all artists were willing to talk to me. But after that initial conversation or two, and me explaining what I did, what the history of Elektra was all about, it was then up to them whether they wanted to sign with a corporation. And some of them did and some of them didn't. At one point in time, it was a short period of time, I was at Elektra, I was at Geffen. I was at Elektra, I was at Geffen. Don't ask. That's 20 years right there in 10 seconds. But at one point, I was at Uni Records. Uni was a label that like Neil Diamond was on in the 60s. Universal was starting it up again. I think it was David Simone who was starting up the label. For some reason, I don't remember specifically because I have like a terrible brain sometimes. I was in the middle of either not working at Elektra or not working at Geffen that I decided, this sounds very interesting. So the first three artists that Uni signed was Steve Earle, Transvision Vamp, and I brought in a band from New York City called Swans. Now, Swans are so effing heavy that if you think heavy metal bands play on 10, they play on 12 in concert for 2 hours. They were fiercely independent. I think I charmed Michael Girard, the lead singer and lyricist of the band. He charmed me, and we thought we were going to come out with a record that was going to really sell. We made a record called The Burning World. Bill Laswell from the group Material produced it. Now, the record is quiet and somber and majestic, and it was not anything that Swans did previous to that. So it really surprised everyone, but I knew I wanted to make that kind of record with them to see what happened. They even did a cover of Steve Winwood and Traffic's Can't Find My Way Home. So elegant, so majestic, so ethereal, so beautiful. Well, we put out this record, The Burning World, on Uni, and shortly after that, it got great radio airplay on the college charts, but Universal Corporation decided, we don't want Uni anymore. So months later, I had to tell Michael Girard that there wasn't going to be a Uni. After that, he decided we stay friends, we're still friends to this day. He decided he was never, ever going to speak to a major again. So he decided he was going to start his own label called Young God Records. And that's where all the Swans records come out on now, is Young God. And, so that was like, I was trying to do something great with them. Nobody at uni was listening. We made a record that departed from the usual sound. It didn't do much. And everybody was I was disappointed, and Michael and his band were truly disappointed. And that was their lesson for themselves. Never want to be involved with a major or not.
I want to ask Michael, and obviously, we're living in a different world now, as
really?
Ritch pointed out. But back, so much of the hard rock scene and experience has a reputation of being macho, testosterone driven, and homophobic.
Sure.
And I'm wondering, you as a gay man, even back then, I mean, obviously that was a much different time back then. What was this your experience?
I don't even know where to begin with this. Sure. I'm sure there are a lot of homophobic young people out there who met me and just didn't know what to make of me. Because it's like, wait, that guy's gay and he loves heavy metal? I see him at all the metal shows. Well, you know what? It's also like when I met with an artist who might have been looking at me a little different. All I ever wanted to do with any artist was talk about music. It had nothing to do with my sexuality. I think there might have been people out there and fans out there and executives out there who, I don't even know what to say about that. I don't think my sexuality ever interfered with anything I did out in the world because I was bold. I was never in the closet. I was, I could point my finger into somebody's fucking leather jacket and say, don't mess with me. Just don't mess with me. And by the end of the night, if they had that extra beer, he'd be hugging me, I'd be hugging him, and life is good. That's the only way I can explain it. But no, my sexuality, honest to God, never was an issue in my career.
You said something very interesting in the documentary about this, which I want to sort of ask you about. You said, I may have encountered homophobic people who you said were almost forced as an A&R executive to come see me and deal with me. And I'm sure that the experience of dealing with me, for the reason that you just articulated, Michael, which was that we just talked about music, and obviously the depth of your knowledge and experience was monumental to them, and that you said one of the things that I'm very proud of is that these people may have never encountered a gay man before, a gay person, and that I may have changed their perception.
The perception, of course, of what gay is. Listen, we're all human beings out there trying on a day-to-day basis to do and be the best person that we can be. Now, most of the time, our sexuality, unless we're talking about somebody you want to be romantically involved with, it never comes up. There's no reason that it should come up because, like I said, I worked at a label. And even when I thought some of these young kids, they walk into my office, real tough guys, I would just sit there and look at them like, really, and we would have a conversation. And the conversation, like I said, it was just always about music. And I hope that when people meet me or have met me back in the day, they just think, well, that guy's really cool. So, what the F, It's like, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
Michael, what inspired your move to Los Angeles to work at Geffen? And I guess before you answer that, did you ever have any experience in LA, or did you know the LA scene, or did you know the city at all? Because everything we've talked about has been New York based. So that I just wanted it's a double question.
I never moved to Los Angeles. I never lived in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
So I could either go on answering that I never lived in Los Angeles, or you could ask me a new question. When I was hired both times at Geffen Records, I lived in New York.
Okay.
I was part of their satellite office. In the end, I felt like being in a satellite office at Geffen really didn't work But I didn't drive. I didn't swim. I didn't do any of that stuff that may have been required to live in Los Angeles.
Okay.
So I was a New Yorker. I want to take the subway. I want to take taxis. I want to walk everywhere. Yeah, so both times I appreciated being at Geffen because, like Elektra, they were a boutique label that were distributed through a major, and they also had great taste in music, whether that was John Lennon, Cher, Whitesnake, Sonic Youth, Beck, White Zombie. It was really like a label that was like, wow, they have the coolest. The same thing with Elektra. We had Anita Baker. We had Motley Crue. We had Metallica. We had The Cure. I mean, it was an array of greatness at both labels. But in the end, it just didn't work for me because I was in the New York office. All the A&R people were getting priority because they were in David's face. They were in Ed Rosenblatt, the president's face. And I was little old me in the satellite office. Now, I learned a lot of things there. I got to sign White Zombie. I got to sign Kane Roberts. And it wasn't for me. So at one point, I called Bob and I said, can I come back? And he said, of course you can come back. And then when I came back, Bob was only there another 2 years, and then someone else took over. So I called Ed Rosenblatt again, the only other person that I had ever dealt with in my whole life. And I said, can I come back? And he said, of course you can come back. So I was there only for a few years. And so if that's like 22 years right there, Elektra, Geffen, Uni, somewhere in the middle. In the end, I wound up, in the end of my 24 years, I guess it was 24, not 25, but around 24 years, was I worked for Chris Blackwell's label, Palm Pictures. He had sold Island. He started this new company that was half independent films and half record company. And they kind of didn't understand me there either. And so I was there for, 3 years. And in 2004, 2005, I saw also, again, the landscape of music. Everything was changing. People were file sharing and downloading and basically stealing music. And I thought to myself, this is what I signed up for back in the day. And I just stopped doing A&R. And then I just started working on projects independently. Like twice I got to work with Cyndi Lauper, which was pure magic. I adore her. And then just kind of helped independent artists because I was now an independent person just working from home.
Yeah. Let me ask you, Michael, how did the culture at Geffen compare with Elektra? I mean, you had two opposing labels, but had a great array of talent. How did that culture,
Are you asking me like what my experience was?
Yeah, like how did the culture at Geffen just basically compare with your experience with Elektra?
Sure. And they'll remain nameless, but all the A&R people at Geffen had huge egos. Oh man, huge egos. And a lot of times the A&R people were pitted against each other.
Interesting.
And yeah, but anyway, that's really how it was. And myself, being, like I said, on the East Coast with the minimum of staff, if I needed to get in David's face or Ed Rosenblatt's face, I would have to just fly out there and, plead my case. And in the end, I just didn't fit in there. So I left twice,
Wow. Good
experience, great people.
Yeah.
I just didn't feel like I fit in.
Yeah, one of our other guests that we had on the show recently was John Kolodner. Did you get to work with John at all in any capacity?
Not really. What a character. Fabulous A&R person. No, come on.
Oh,
what a character.
Yeah, he is a
fabulous A&R person.
Yeah.
No, everybody, like I said, or maybe I didn't say, at Geffen, the A&R people, they worked in their offices, the doors were closed, and they just did their thing. There was no sharing. There was no helping each other out. Everyone just did, I think, what they wanted to do, and I don't know, that was that. I don't know if I can answer that any better than that.
No, not at all. That's great. Listen, in the wonderful documentary made about you that we've mentioned before, Who the Fuck Is That Guy? You spoke about the unique reasons that you wanted to sign White Zombie, and it didn't have to do with great songs at the time. Can you talk about what that was that made them special to you to really go to bat for them?
Oh, yeah.
Because your instincts as an A&R executive were right.
Oh, well, here we go. My friend Daniel Ray songwriter, producer, worked a lot with the Ramones, wrote Pet Sematary, worked with Iggy, was in Chris Goss's band, The Masters of Reality, another New Yorker. Well, really, Red Bank, New Jersey. He was out there, as like myself, out every night. He was trying to get Circus of Power, Raging Slab, and White Zombie signed. He wound up getting both those bands, Raging Slab and Circus of Power, signed to RCA. No one was interested in White Zombie. They had made records for Caroline. They were noisy records. And Daniel said to me, I think you're going to love this band. Sure. Daniel's a dear friend of mine for many, many years. Let's go. So we go to a little box, hole in the wall, under the restaurant Indochine, right off Astor Place on Lafayette Street. And like I say in the movie, in the corner in the back in the dark, there was this band on a stage that was maybe, not even a foot high. And it was noise, and they were sweating, and there were dreadlocks. And I thought, oh, my God, these people are so interesting. And I stayed for the whole show. And like Rob Zombie says in the documentary, I really did hear a riff. I didn't hear a song. God knows what they were playing. I have no idea. But that noise spoke to me. That's all. I can only say that noise spoke to me. It's like when you hear something, you go, wow, that's something. Well, yes, of course, as an A&R person, everything is based on the songs. But for some reason, I didn't care. I just thought, I think I have to have these people in my life. So when it was over, I spoke to Rob. He was very charming, very sweet. I mean, sweating like a banshee, pig, I don't know. There was Rob, and we started talking. We connected. He said to me, I love my band. We're going to be big, and I'm also going to make films. He said it with such confidence that I thought, I love this person. I friggin' love this person. So I said, I worked for Geffen, and I want to sign you. And I said, but you know what? Let's take a little precaution here. Let's do a demo. So there was an artist that did electronic music named Jim Thirlwell, Australian, lived in Brooklyn for a couple of years. Jim made records under the name Fetus. You've got fetus on your breast. Fetus uberalis. Fetus under glass. And I thought, oh, this guy is just as eccentric as Rob's music is. So, again, we did a 5-song demo. I just found the DAT the other day, and it was good. It was good. But Jim had an ego. Rob Zombie had an ego, and it just wasn't going to work. But I was grateful that Jim gave me that demo that really flushed out what the material was all about. And it was because really of Daniel Ray and Jim Thirlwell and Rob's confidence that I signed them. We make the first album, Devil Music Volume 1, La Sexorcisto, Devil Music Volume 1. And I think it's going to be the biggest record on the planet, next to like my Metallica signing. So I do a whole to-do with the Geffen marketing, publicity, radio people. And they're like, interesting. I don't know if a lot of people loved them at Geffen, but we made a video. We had a single. It was starting to get played late night on MTV. And one day it just stalled at 180,000 units. Boy, was I not happy. And neither was anyone else at Geffen. It's like, okay, Alago, what are we doing now with this band? Well, I didn't have to do anything because out of the blue, there was a little show called Beavis and Butthead, and Beavis and Butthead decided that White Zombie was their new favorite band. So they played the single morning, noon, and night. And really, that catapulted that album to 1 million units. Those two little bratty, rotten Mike Judge characters who were like out of their mind helped make that record a success.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And then once everybody got the record, understood the record, saw these people, also 4 band members who were charismatic and crazy on stage, and the kids loved them. And, there you are. We made a second White Zombie record. Rob's ego got in the way again, or maybe not in the way, but Rob had an ego, and he just wanted to do his own stuff after that. So he made many solo albums, and he became a film director, and that's what he does. And, I knew that from the first day that Rob was going to do something.
And that's incredible that he had the vision even back then, that he told you, I'm going to do this music and I'm going to be a film director. I mean, that's unbelievable.
That's right.
And
he
I'm
was.
Gonna make film.
Yeah, he did it.
You also spoke in that documentary about your excessive drinking and drug use.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. What was the final straw that got you to completely stop?
Oh, this is a good one. I drank and drug a lot. I thought it was okay. I thought it was okay because I never missed work. I may have had my door closed to my office till 3 p.m. until the fog lifted, but I was there. I don't know how I got through making records, but I did.
It's called being in your 20s.
Oh, right. Oh,
seriously,
yes.
Michael, because I did the same thing.
How about maybe even being late 20s, maybe
30s? Yeah, exactly.
Still, of course. You can do it.
Yeah, of course you can.
So,
you have the end. Yeah, you can't do it at any other station of life. That's what you don't get. That's what I learned. You don't get in later life. You can do it in your 20s, but that's about it.
Well, at some point, let me think. What was the straw? Okay. I've been drinking and drugging a lot, lying about it to everyone. I go see Metallica, and I am lit. But I also have to just tell you this. I love taking pictures. So back then, I was carrying a Polaroid camera with me. And so I go see Metallica. I missed the entire show. I'm passed out on the tour bus. Now, I had been going on the road with them for a while. They were not happy with me. And they took pictures of me passed out. And someone sent them to Bob the next day. Oh, yes. And, of course, I was like, oh, boy. So Bob threw them on the table in his office and said, what's this? I said, oh, Bob. Laughing and carrying on. But, part of the backstory is they told him they were sick and tired of my behavior on the road. So Bob said to me, you're full of shit. So there's two things here. You could go to rehab tomorrow, or you could pack your office up and get out and leave the building today. And I'm like, oh, but Bob, you don't understand. He said, Michael, you're fired. I just went to my office. I slammed the door. His executive assistant, Ruth, came in and said, Michael, Bob does not want to fire you. I said, but Ruth. And she says, oh, wait a minute. You're going to fight with me now? I said, no, Ruth, I'm not. She said, go to rehab. 30 days. Go. You're not going to get fired, Michael. Go. So I went to Hazelden, and I was there for about 32 days in Minneapolis. I came back to Elektra. I started my Nina Simone record. But, if we could just change the subject a little bit, because I'd like my interviews to be a bit more well-rounded than just the music. So anyway, it is all about the music. People know me from the music, but I got sober, and I wasn't appreciative of getting sober. I thought, I'm going to show them I don't have to drink. But, I didn't do anything suggested for me. I didn't go to the men's group they suggested me to go to. I didn't go to any AA meetings. So what did I have in my head? I had the same BS. I didn't learn anything. I didn't know anything more than my crazy brain. So I stayed sober for 8 years. I was what they call a dry drunk. At 40 years old, I went out and drank and drugged and wound up in crack dens, and I wound up in St. Vincent's Hospital a lot. And that was the worst 7. I got arrested because I pissed on a cop's leg. I was a madman for 7 years. And at 47 years old, I was taking my HIV meds with vodka. My liver was hurting, and I what they called the grace of God or white light experience, I just thought, I can't do this anymore. So it's Sunday, October 21st, 2007. I don't know how I knew to walk to a 12-step meeting. I went to a 12-step meeting, and I never left. I'm 12 years clean and sober. I go to meetings 5 days a week. I help other people who are struggling. And all of that has helped me to grow in every single way.
Michael, that's a very, very inspiring story because, you know, what's so interesting is that, you know, a lot of us don't get it the first time. I mean, you know, I stopped doing drugs in a certain period and never, I stopped 6 years before I stopped. I did it the first time and exactly the same thing. And then I went back to doing it and, you know, ended up in an emergency room thinking I was having a heart attack.
Oh, yeah,
that was my thing to, you know, you cannot
come to Jesus moment
of like, you know
Yes,
what,
sir.
this is serious. I wasn't having a heart attack, but I thought I was. And that was it. 1988. And I never touched the drugs again. And, you know, and I did.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah, no. And congratulations to you too, because,
thanks.
you know, that's the key. And what you said that was really key about it was the fact that, you know, which is very typical. I get that totally, where you come out of the rehab and it's like, you know what, fuck this. I'm not going to do what they recommend. I'm not going to go to meetings. I'm above this. I've got this under control.
Oh, that was me.
Yeah.
For sure.
and then you end up where you end up, which is, you know, what you talked about.
Oh, yeah.
that
Like I said,
period.
it was the worst from 40 to 47.
Yes.
The worst period of my life.
Yeah.
Jail, St. Vincent's numerous times where the nurses knew my last name. Getting on airplanes, don't remember getting on airplanes and winding up in the worst places in the United States. I'm really lucky to be alive because of having HIV, and I had a terrible, compromised immune system. You know, now, having 12 years clean and sober, taking my medicine like I'm supposed to, they can't even detect the virus in my body right now.
Which is fantastic.
It's been
exactly.
zero.
It's amazing.
At zero. And like that doesn't happen with a lot of people. And I got sick, just real quick, I got really sick in the early 90s when there was no medicine yet. I had a doctor, Barbara Starrett. She was on the forefront. She was in the laboratories of making things happen, paying attention to like what could potentially work for these men and women. It was like, I liken it these days, and I say this in my book that's coming out, it was like very Dallas Buyers Club. We were just trying to get anything in our hands that we think could help us not die. And, you know, I was very lucky because she was an extraordinary doctor. At one point, I had full-blown AIDS. I was on my sofa for like a year, but I hung on. I had vitamin drips. I had these weird pills from Mexico. I don't even know what the heck these pills were. And Barbara basically saved my life. She saved my life. She saved my life. And like I said, don't drink, don't drug. I have a new life. In my new life, I showed up for my late mom for the last 12 years. She died 2 years ago at 94. That, being clean and sober, helped me have a renewed relationship with my sister Cheryl, which I never had before. It's a miracle. It's a beauty. I adore my sister. And it's extraordinary because I'm a person who shows up for everything these days. And I'm here to help you and you and you if you need help, if you want the help. With anything. So I have no idea where we're going with the end of this. But, you know, it's a funny thing because I don't know how much longer or shorter you want to talk, but I have a book coming out in March.
I want to ask you about that you have a book coming out. So tell us about it. Tell us about it.
Great.
Yeah.
So, you know, just I have to say, in my new life, the reason this documentary happened is because Drew Stone, the director, paid attention to me over the years, saw what I was doing, and saw that I was sober. Listen, if I was still falling on the ground, vomiting everywhere, acting like a complete ass, do you think he would have made a film about me? No. He saw who I was 4 years ago when I had 8 years under my belt of sobriety, and he said, I'm going to make a film about you. And because I never had bad relationships with artists, whether it's John Lydon, Cyndi Lauper, Phil from Pantera, Metallica, Rob Zombie, Sean from White Zombie. I don't know how this happened. I never had a bad word with these people. I never, when we had to either drop them or I had to say, you know, we're not going in the studio now, you need another 2 songs, whatever it was, I managed to maintain a certain integrity with these artists. So Drew made this movie, which has been incredible. People from all over the world, when it got on Netflix 2 years ago, call me all the time. Whether that's, dude, you signed Metallica, to, you know what, Michael, I'm struggling. I have HIV. Do you have any advice for me? What should I do? And, one day I got 1,200 emails. And I got up 7 o'clock in the morning. I had 3 cups of tea, and I sat there. And a lot of the people who said, dude, you signed Metallica, I sent them a letter with a picture of me and James. And most of those people got the same email. But then you can't tell somebody who's pouring their heart out to you because they're ill and saying, thanks for watching the film. So I had to write back to these people and say, I'm sorry that you're struggling. I struggle too. But if you are at the point in time where you need to take medication, take medication. You can't drink and drug. Do what the doctors tell you to do. And because we live in a world now where everything is, it's you can live with HIV. Do that. Be strong. Be brave. So anyway, that's why I feel like that movie came about. Publishing companies started talking to me because they saw that movie. And again, I was blessed with being able to tell more stories about my crazy, wonderful life. So I have a book coming out March 1st, 2020. It's called I Am Michael Alago, Breathing Music, Signing Metallica, Beating Death. That's the subtitle. And it's really a really good book. And, I didn't intend it to come out like short stories, but for some reason it came out like short stories. So if you read about Brooklyn, I think you know what you're going to get. If you read about Never Fall in Love with a Hooker, you know what you're going to get. If you read about Blanche, my mother, because I talk about her lots in these last few years, you're going to read something cool and funny about Blanche. And the very last chapter in my book is called Gratitude, because that's what I live in these days. I live in gratitude and show up for life because now anything and everything is possible. It's funny. I just want to tell you, I was going to ask if we could start this talk with this quote that the reason it came up today is because this book fell out of my bookshelf by Dale Carnegie, who wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah, one of my favorite books.
So, please, me too. So it opened to a quote that I decided I was going to use on social media today, but maybe even in closing, it makes for some just more positivity. And the quote is, today is life, the only life you're sure of. Make the most of today. Get interested in something. Shake yourself awake. Develop a hobby. Let the winds of enthusiasm sweep through you. Live today with gusto. It's incredible.
Wow, that is incredible.
And that's how I want to live every day.
Yeah,
we can open the piece with that.
Yeah, we'll open the piece with that. Yeah,
absolutely.
And it's a beautiful segue because you're almost like reading our minds here because you're referencing this book which I love personally myself. And I wanted to ask you, Michael, throughout your career as an A&R executive, have there been any books or films or art that have really resonated with you professionally speaking that you could recommend to our audience?
Oh, gosh. Oh, my Lord.
You already did one, so.
Right.
Well, let's see.
And, of course, besides your amazing book coming out and the Netflix special, which we're going to obviously be, putting it all in the show notes. So.
For many years, I was a fan of Pasolini. He wrote a great little book called Roman Poems. I'm a huge fan of Patti Smith. Her 1975 album, Horses, changed my life. So I buy every single Patti Smith book when I can find, ever, all the time. There was an Irish poet who just died about 3-4 years ago named John O'Donoghue. Oh, my gosh, beautiful work. I even open up my book, my memoir, with one of his poems, and you'll read about it when you get the book. Right now, I'm reading a book on bees and why bees are important, written by Rudolf Steiner, Austrian philosopher who wrote about the importance of bees in 1925. And it's still relevant today. I don't know. I think when people follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'm not trying to be vague or evasive or anything, I always speak about music and art and theater and books. So I'm hoping that at least some part, all of your audience will know something about me, and they'll go to those places to hear what I've been doing, what I've been up to, what art shows I'm going to, what authors I'm reading at the moment. So I think that kind of says a little something.
And we'll definitely list all of that in the show notes for everybody to check out. Michael, what advice can you offer for our artists and bands who are pursuing a career as an A&R executive?
Oh boy, well, it's a very different world out there. Things are not marketed the same as they used to be. But forget about that for a moment. If you are an artist, if you are a singer-songwriter that feel like the only thing you need and want to do with your life is music, then you have to just do it. I can almost cry thinking about this because I love musicians, I love artists, I love people. Now, not everyone is going to make it to that Metallica level, but if you're any good at your job and you're out there and you're playing live and you play every night as if your life depended on it, something will happen. Something. I don't know what that something is, but something good will happen. And part of that something good is if you're someone who wants to be on an independent label, a major label, and you are playing like your life depends on it every night, you know what? That 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 A&R people could be in your audience. And like anything in life, it only takes one person to say yes to you. So play like your life depended on it. Be great at what you do. And hopefully you will have some kind of success. And that's what I wish for everybody, just some kind of success. And I think that's it at the moment.
Michael, I want to ask you the same question in reverse. I want to ask you, because of your career and what we've talked about, what advice would you have for anyone who's listening who really is interested in pursuing a career as an A&R executive? Not as an artist, but they really want to pursue a career doing that. What advice would you have for them?
Yeah. Let me have to think about that because I don't know. I find that might be a little tough for me to answer because it is a different world out there. But keep in mind, if you don't have an A&R department, you don't have a record company because everything stems from the greatness of the records coming out of the A&R department. You know, I don't know, if you're a young person and you want to be an A&R executive, and if you know people at record companies, maybe you will play them some of your favorite local artists. Maybe there's someone that you encounter that you have an interview with and you let him or her know why you feel you would make a great A&R person. Other than that, you know, I really don't know what else to say. I mean, you know, it's odd because a lot of people don't say to me, I want to be an A&R person. They mostly, I'm a musician, this is what I want to do. But if that's something that captivates you, well, I hope you're listening to a lot of different kinds of music. And if you happen to be in touch with a business affairs person, an A&R person, head of a record company, let them know that that's what your goal is and play the music that you're interested in and see what happens from there, because you never know.
Yeah, you do never know. And I guess, too, it was interesting, you know, who I think it was either Freud or Jung who said self can never reveal self to self. And what was interesting, why I bring that up to you right now, is because you were saying, you know, that question may be a tough one. And I immediately wanted to interrupt you and say, but Michael, your whole fucking life is the illustration of being a great A&R person. Your passion for music, your interest in art, your interest in theater, your interest in culture, you're diving into the whole thing.
Yeah,
you did. Yeah,
you
didn't know it. Exactly. It's like self can't reveal self to self. So, I mean, it's so true. It's so true. Michael, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this. It means so much to me, and Eric and I are both very, very, very grateful to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm always happy and grateful to put myself out there on the line so I can talk about music and art and theater and addiction and recovery and health and thriving in life. So thank you very much for asking.
Thank you. Oh my God. What an incredible interview. I've never really spoken with him before, but he's one of those guys who, he has such an incredible history, and I've been very, very aware, as a former A&R executive myself, been very, very aware of his incredible history with the artists and so forth. And then, of course, got, much deeper knowledge about him.
Right.
And I want to say to all of you listening, if you are interested in the history of Michael Alago and music and A&R, watch the documentary on Netflix. Who the fuck is that guy? That's what it's
amazing,
called.
Amazing.
It's a great documentary. It covers his life from the time that he was a child, all through his success, the ups and the downs, and his whole career until he left music. So, anybody who's interested in, especially in the hard rock scene, which Michael had a lot of success. And he would be the last person you'd probably ever imagine would have a lot of success in that particular world. And he addresses that head on. And I thought it was really, really interesting. But, the thing that I loved about this is, the way we started out with the interview with him, which was really interesting, which is about him being an outsider. He says at the very beginning, he says, I've always been a loner. I was a loner as a kid, and and I loved listening to music, and he developed this love for a really wide variety of music.
Yeah, the diversity was just incredible, which reflected too. I mean, he went from Metallica to Nina Simone, so I mean,
exactly.
That goes to show you the diversity.
Yes, and growing up and going to all of those clubs, and really, I mean, this was a man who was totally devoted, living
and breathing it.
Yes, and working it, and working at the Ritz, and working with live bands, and seeing what works, what
and part
doesn't.
of that musical cultural shift that was going on there in the late
was right
70s, early 80s.
He was right in the thick of it.
Yeah,
and he saw it firsthand, literally, from the front lines.
Yeah, but I really loved the diversity, like he says, and I think that that's a big thing that anybody who's listening or artists and musicians is that you have to just expose yourself and immerse yourself with with different music. I think that's what kind of completes you as an artist, because there's so much great, incredible music that happened in the past and it's happening now. So I think it's interesting. It's a true lost art form, I think, to have that kind of diversity and that deepness that he was listening to, talking about him going to buy the 45s, and he was listening to everything from Grand Funk Railroad and all these other artists. Aretha Franklin. I mean, that was the diversity of the time.
Yes. And, and also it's interesting because, he spoke about that criteria of,
as an A&R,
that this was something that, he felt you had to have something to say.
Yep.
Number one. And you had to be a charismatic performer.
Wildly charismatic.
Charismatic on stage. And he said, hopefully on off stage as well.
Right.
So the personality as to who you were, so that you were in alignment with that.
Exactly. And if he couldn't live with what they were saying, he just didn't want to be a part of it. So for him, it was a personal thing. Some A&R, I've noticed people like Pete Gambarg and other people that we've interviewed in the past can kind of separate themselves from that.
Yes.
But he was one of those A&R people that had to be just totally immersed in it, from everything that they were saying to the music and on and on and on. So I thought it was very interesting points. And I think the other criteria that was important that I think he said, which I think most people would agree on, is that the lyrics and connecting with the audience, how important that was.
Yes, and he spoke about the lyrical content of the acts on a global sense, that you have to
Correct.
connect.
Yes.
You have to connect with people on a global level.
Right. The other interesting thing that I thought was what he talked about with White Zombie.
Oh, that was
and the
very
signing process
with,
there weren't really any songs there. I think he called it, he heard like riffs. There were riffs that ended up being developed.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And he said that the look, spoke to him, and the noise spoke to him, and
Rob spoke to him. I mean, not only literally, but figuratively spoke to him in terms of his artistry and his vision and his confidence. He mentioned that word a couple times.
Right.
His confidence, because that engendered a sense of confidence in Michael to move forward with this.
Right. And, and so I really think that those points that you brought up, and that he knew what he wanted as an artist, and that's what attracted him to him. Not only the look, and yeah, he called it noise, but he thought that there was riffs there, and soon enough that got fleshed out, and look at what ended up happening. I mean, and then it was ironic that he talked about that the record stalled. I think it was like at 180,000 units. And then it took this show, Beavis and Butthead, that kind of had like this cult following at the time. And that's what broke the record. So it's just, very interesting. And then with that, everybody somehow got it, because I think a lot of people at the label didn't get it at first, and they didn't know what to do with it. And then when it kind of was stalling, and then this whole thing happened with Beavis and Butthead, and then it turned into a platinum seller.
Yes, it's very similar to the stories I used to hear from people that I knew at Geffen when Nirvana came out.
Right.
This was something that, it was Gary Gersh who signed the band. This was something that at best they thought if they really pushed hard and really worked it, they could sell maybe 400,000, 500,000,
which
tops.
Isn't too shabby.
No, it's not too shabby.
But it was a different era back then.
It was a different era, and they were basing it off of, the success that Sonic Youth had.
Right.
Little did they know. But it's one of those things. And the Beavis and Butthead thing was like one of those confluences.
Right. And it was perfect timing, and it was perfect everything.
Absolutely. It was the perfect marriage of TV show, visual, and an outlet. It showed you the power of MTV
at the time. Yeah. I really love too what he talked about, his advice to artists, that to me the biggest thing is playing as if your life depended on it.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And he spoke about that. You remember he made that reference about Metallica.
Exactly.
That's what he loved about Metallica. And he said, and in James Hetfield, they had a real leader who could lead and charismatically, communicate and hook the audience. Absolutely. And had that ability.
And I think he also mentioned about just it taking one person to say yes, in terms of A&R.
That's all it takes.
Yeah, just one person to believe. Yeah.
The Beatles, I remember 20. It's their famous story. 26 rejections. 26 labels.
And I think
turned
Capitol
them down.
had turned them down twice or three times before.
Twice before. That's right.
And on the third one, they got it.
Well, yeah, but it was Parlophone, which was a small little comedy record label in England that ended up signing a comedy label. I mean, it's can you imagine Peter Sellers and all these other acts that were on Parlophone for the comedy records, and they are the ones that signed the Beatles. So there was no confidence that they would be this gigantic with what they ultimately became.
And what I loved what he said was that not every band is going to become at the level of Metallica, but at least if you try to play like if your life depended on it, that something good will come. What that is, you don't know, but you just have to know that if you put in the hard work and effort, you will get some sort of results from it. So I think that was a really wise, especially in today's day and age where you've got everybody still wants to be signed and wants to be the biggest thing since Michael Jackson, and the reality is more than likely that's not going to happen. So I think if you play as if your life depended on it and write great songs, good things will come to you. It's just a matter of what those things that, manifest themselves.
Yeah, and remember, the definition of success has changed.
Exactly.
There's a lot of people who are having successful careers, and by that I mean they are able to do music today and nothing else.
Right.
But they're not people
Exactly.
They're not people whose names
they're not
are
household
famous.
names.
They're not household names. They're not even people that we're aware of, but they are making a living doing music and nothing else.
Yep.
And that is success. That
Absolutely.
is success when they don't have to have another job, you know? They may not be selling out arenas or stadiums, but they're making a living doing music. Some people are making very, very good livings doing this.
Absolutely.
But they don't have the fame. So, this goes back to...
What's the trade-off?
What's the trade-off? And it goes back to what we had talked about before. What is, in
what is your
podcasts,
definition of success?
And what is your why? Why are you doing this? You know, do you need like the accolades and the big, applause, or do you really have, is this really your journey?
Exactly.
Really
are you going to
path?
become a journeyman
Yeah.
and travel that path?
That's right. For the rest of your life. Is this really your destiny and what you were meant to do?
Hey, Insiders, thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We really appreciate it. To get show notes, links, and everything that was mentioned during this interview, head on over to our official website at MUBUTV.com/podcast/show notes. If you're enjoying the content and what we're doing here on the show, please subscribe to the podcast podcast on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts from. And don't forget to rate and review our show over at iTunes. 5-star reviews are always welcome and help to ensure that our podcast stands out on the top-rated and new and noteworthy charts on iTunes in our space. You can also find us on social media at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all ending with the handle MUBUTV, which is spelled MUBUTV. Don't forget to catch our flagship show, the MUBUTV Insider Video Series, airing every week on YouTube at youtube.com/MUBUTV. This show was produced and created by Ritch, Esra, and Eric Knight. This show would not be here if it weren't for our amazing team, which are the following: interview editors Sarah Nissenbaum and Alex Taylor. Show notes and transcriptions by Janny Chang, Nicole Capodoglo, Lilia Owens, and Sarah Nissenbaum. Theme music by Disciples of Babylon. And be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the MUBUTV Insider